All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. If you are on the advisory council, we have a lot to talk about. So for our roll call, if you can turn it over, or if you can put your name and organization in the chat, that would be great. I do know of possibly two people that might be showing up late. So if so I'll probably be reminding folks to put their name in as well, just so that we can have accurate counts. And so, uh, so yeah, let's just take a look. Well, I'll let folks put their names in, and then I can, as people are talking, I can give an update on the needs assessment. So NDE has provided all of our comments to our contractor on the needs assessment. They are diligently incorporating those. And hopefully, very, very soon, we will have something to distribute uh, uh, to the team and to the legislators and to the governor, and then post it on our website. Ellen?
Yeah, just can you make your comments to the contractor public to the advisory council? Is that possible? Just for transparency, so we know what the MDE is thinking around any substantial comments they might have provided.
That's something I'll have to check on internally. All right. So just doing a count. 3. So I see that we have 15 people on our 15 people who have put their names in the chat and are also on the council. Is there anyone else who is on the council that has not put their name on the in the chat?
William.
Okay, so 16.
Yeah, I'm getting to my computer now. I'm on the phone right now.
Okay, cool. And then I know Eileen is going to be joining us in just a few minutes. So, okay. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, as we were finishing yesterday, people were dropping off of the call. Although I think we did get through the majority of our conversation on recommendation 9, which had to do with targets and measures, measurements. I'm still going to open it up to see, since we've had a week to kind of think about this. But was there any more discussion that we needed to have on recommendation 9? Peter?
Yeah, I apologize. And I'm just coming back to this measurement of reusable by material type. Reusable packaging is difficult to measure already. And I guess I'm struggling with, if a bread tray, which is majority of it is plastic, but it's got metal handles. So they're reporting, I guess, on the weight of the tray plus the weight of the handles. So is the handles are metal reusable, and I guess I'm trying to figure out, what are we trying to achieve? And the more we add details and complexity, the more difficult it makes it for the pro to measure. I understand the intent is to measure and to ensure that there are more reusable packaging that's being rotated within the economy. Again, I just don't know the practicality of by material type.
Chaz, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point from Peter. It costs money to get data. Data is not free. And the more data requirements we impose through any regulatory activity in Maryland, the more expensive it becomes to meet those regulations. And I would join in Peter's comments about reuse.
So I think we need to do, when we get to the vote, because I know we had some folks who had some pretty strong opinions. We're probably going to have to do a vote with biomaterial type and without biomaterial type, and go from there.
Have we defined material type beyond the obvious?
So in our needs assessment, we have various different material types. That was also part of our waste characterization study as well. And then we're looking at recycling rates for those various different material types. We also report on recycling rates and our biomaterial type in our report as well. So although our needs assessment will have like rigid plastic and flexible packaging, there's an estimation on what those recycling rates are. Our report doesn't do that, but that's how I would probably think about that. And it could even be by covered material type too, but that might, we still have to figure out what the rules, regulations, and plan are going to be. So I think the question is do we want to include this in the first place, is what I'm hearing from folks. I know there were some folks who wanted to keep in biomaterial type. Did you have want to speak up on that particular item? Okay. Either Martha or Scott, or who's first?
You go first, Scott.
Thanks. I'm out on the West Coast. It's very early, so pardon me. I'm going to stay off camera until I can be presentable here. Not every type of packaging is going to be reusable. Material types can be very broad categories depending on how many plastic categories you have. There's a few categories, I guess, within paper and metal. I just don't know that you need the percentage of packaging sold for every material type, right? I think there are some that are going to lend themselves to reusable and refillable better than others, and that for those material types where reuse is a viable, economy, option, then figure out what you want. But I don't know that we need to try to. We had the same discussion in Colorado on fluid motor oil. Are we really trying to get the people to go back to the track auto and refill with their oil? Okay, so I mean, let's just. I don't know that that's needed in the first study. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, Martha, since you let Scott go, and then Abigail.
I was just going to say this discussion about material type is only for the issue of reusable, correct?
Correct. Yes.
I would think that we'd like to know what percentage of packaging is reusable in general as well. I mean, why isn't like multi-material a potential material type? Can't that just be dealt with in that way? The things that are only one material and those materials, and then ones that are mixed, and then we'll know that reusables are mostly mixed or mostly not mixed, but at least we'll know what percentage are reusable that are sold in the state, which is the really key thing.
Abigail?
I think it's important to think about the reason why we want it to be classified by material type, because from one angle, knowing what's reusable by material type, if that's going to be a factor in goals or measuring, setting requirements of some sort, then having it divided so that you can examine the differences in how a material can be reusable. For example, an Amazon box can be reused by an individual. They can use that box again to ship something from their home. That's not going to be quantified in a complex reusable scheme. Paper bags are going to be reused to collect compostables or collect recycling. It's not going to be a part of a scheme, but that doesn't change the fact that by, unknown definition, because we don't have a definition here, it is being reused, just not on the same sort of scale. On the other hand, if it's just is it reusable or not, it becomes a potentially more of a calculation burden and data collection burden than it is a boon to the information gathering side of things. So I think it would be a question of how it would be used.
Peter?
Sorry, and I'm not trying to be too absolute and firm on this. I think the concern is measuring reuse is, I think, a challenge that lots of different jurisdictions are trying to address right now. And there's not necessarily a clear way to do it. A travel mug, is it included as a reusable? If it's made of metal mostly, but a plastic lid, how do you measure that? And I think all I'm trying to say is, ideally you provide some flexibility for the pro as they develop their program plan to come forward with an idea as to how that could be measured, and to talk through that rather than trying to be too prescriptive within the legislation itself.
Who is next? William.
Hello. In my experience, reuse programs are very difficult in and of themselves. And even to drive scale, the amount of cycles that you have to actually make it make sense. I would think that to start this program, you wouldn't want to encumber it by any means. And sometimes collecting this data might scare people. Collecting or pulling this data together might scare people off. I think, like, what I've seen is people, at least with reuse programs, really trying to drive pilots just to see where you are and create a baseline. So I think going to this level of detail too quickly, may end up with analysis paralysis. You may want to start with just really trying to drive the reuse in and of the type of reuse programs that you want to begin with. You then come back and start looking at the material types later. Maybe it's a phased approach in terms of legislation.
Yeah. All right. A lot of really good discussion. Is there, so as folks were talking, I put 2 votes. So the first vote is yes for the recommendation as is with, I should say, with material type for reuse category. And then this is for reuse. So is there, unless there's anything else, is there a motion to start the vote? It sounds like folks.
So move, Bradley.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, so vote one, if you can raise your hand for yes for the recommendation as is with material type for the reuse category. All right, if you can lower your hand and then if we can get a vote for no. So I see 10 so far. We have 16 on the line right now. I see Eileen hasn't joined us quite yet, but we do have a quorum. So we would have 3 who are abstaining. All right, you all can lower your vote. We're going to go to vote 2 right here. If folks can raise their hand, yes, for the recommendation as is without material type for the reuse category. If you can raise your hands. Hold on, let me just see. Yeah, that is everyone. So we have 14. If you can raise your, folks can lower their hands now. And now if you can raise your hand for a no vote on vote 2. I did see that Eileen just joined us. So I did see 1 vote for no on this. But we do have a council member who joined. So just for the benefit of Eileen, I'm going to go back and just talk about what we were just talking about. So Eileen, for you, we were talking about this reusable, it's reusable target for measurement right here. And the question is including by material type. It sounded like there was maybe some concerns that this is too much right now, and we're more focused on more reuse, but not necessarily by material type. And we also heard that it would be beneficial to know this, especially from knowing what types of materials are being reused, and is there a reason why that is. So the question, we did a vote for the recommendation as is with the material type for the reuse category. And then we did another vote, yes, for the recommendation as is without material type for the reuse category. I know that you told me that you were just going to be a few minutes late. But since you are on the council, I would want to record your vote.
Thanks, Bradley. So from my perspective, I prefer the recommendation with material type.
So you would be a yes for vote 1 and a no for vote 2, then?
I would be a yes for vote 1. And I would be a no for vote 2.
Okay. All right. We now have 17 council members online, which means we had 2 no's. And then, so that means that we would have 1 abstaining on this one. Okay. All right. So, I'm going to move on to the next recommendation. Shannon. Yeah.
I hate to interrupt you. We only have 16 according to the list of individuals that have either signed in or been made visible or announced.
So,
Just for the record, I have Lee Zimmerman, John Nyman, Frankie Sherman, Chris Pilsner, Eileen Ko, Angie Webb, Michael Okorafor, Ellen Valentino, William Singleton, Scott DeFife, Abigail Stein, Delphine Cocker, Peter Hargrave, Chaz Miller, Kelly Jordan, and Martha Ainsworth.
did you get John Nyman on there? Because I think he.
I did.
Yeah, she
I
did.
did.
Yep, she did.
So that's 16, just to let you know.
I see. So were there any, okay, good to know. Was there anyone that, that Shannon did not call who is on the council or is representing someone, on the council? Okay. All right. Thank you, Shannon, for that. All right, moving on to our next one. This is recommendation 10. I'm going to put this all on one page so that we don't get distracted by other items. So we sent this out to the group beforehand. And just a note, let me scroll out so I can see who made these edits. We did have a recommendation to change access and service, informed by the, I think it was a news assessment, and it should have been needs assessment. So if I ever caught that, thank you. To clarify, the pro can monitor compliance, but is not the regulator. This was a comment from CAA. This was a comment from AFPA. In other states, the pro is producing readily recyclable or uniform collection standard list. To be clear on what is recyclable and not based on engagement by stakeholders right here. And then level of education awareness. There was a comment from AFPA, just to add some context to this one, assessment of the effectiveness of these education and awareness initiatives towards achieving program goals. We also had Chaz in one of his emails sent out asking why the single stream versus dual stream was here. Eileen, I think he had a similar comment. And then there was a comment, I think, from Chaz on this one as well, but I don't recall what that was. So those were some of the changes that were requested since we sent the original document to folks. So I'm gonna go up to see who has their hands raised. Chaz?
Yeah, I find recommendation 10 very confusing as to its purpose. The black dot, the white dot, the black squares, I'm not sure, I haven't quite cracked that code yet. And in particular, once we get down to PRO has the ability to audit producer reported data. And then what is the white dots below that? Are they under that black square? Are they a totally separate thing? I just find this a very confusing recommendation. And what, I'm not even sure what its purpose is as a whole.
So the purpose, at least for this one, so the original, so a few meetings ago, we had information submitted to us by Ellen with the Beverage Association, Sierra Club, and Trash Free Maryland. That was kind of the basis for these recommendations. We've since been getting, since we sent those out, we've been getting updates. So in that original submittal, it had operational considerations. And then these categories right here were the operational considerations from our, I should say the white dot, were the operational considerations from our conversation with Eunomia and HDR. That was maybe 4 meetings ago. So just trying to align back to stuff that the advisory council had already seen. And then I think Michael, these 2 items or these 3 items you had requested to be added. And then I tried, since that point, I tried to identify who was making these other comments as well. So this is a diverse group. We're getting a lot of feedback from folks from many different stakeholders. So it's trying to bring in that feedback and then come to consensus on it. And if this advisory council, I'm just going to pick a random line, and it's, don't read anything to this. If the advisory council doesn't want to vote on this line in particular, but thinks that the other items are generally acceptable, then the advisory council can vote that way.
Okay, well, I got a very specific question about one of them. The level of investment in MRF/composting technology and infrastructure. The plan should you include options to use new technology? Isn't that the responsibility of the facility operator to make those decisions? I mean, the PRO is a bunch of packagers, with all due respect. It's the facility operators who know the business of recycling.
Yeah, so that's a good point. In the bill that just dropped, that talks about that counties can still make their decisions on how they want to implement. That's a pretty long-standing precedent in the state of Maryland as well, that the state has overarching goals, but the counties are implementing the recycling programs themselves in their own jurisdictions. And then that would also extend to private companies that are also doing business in that state, or in that county, I should say, as well. So yeah, again, this came from our conversation with Eunomia and HDR about 4 or so meetings ago. And because we did have a part of that conversation was how much investment did we want to do, and then we also had a conversation on, do we want to invest in better technology or current tech, or some just technology that may not be as good, and then would you get better return on investment with that? So those were just some of the things that, reminding folks that things that we've talked about in this group as well.
Well, why would we want to invest in less better technology? I just find the whole thing confusing, and actually that part of the law that you're referring to also made it clear that MRF operators, whether public or private, would have the decision on what equipment would be in their MRFs.
Yeah. Chris.
Yep. Hey, yeah, I think we might have to vote on this bullet by bullet, Brad, to your point earlier, to the one, Chaz was just speaking about the level of investment for the private processors. If we're required to process different types of material than we're already set up for and spend, whomever has a facility, I mean, that's really going to change things, right? If we have to add A, B, and C products, that we're not set up for to process, there's going to be some additional costs and infrastructure with that. So I do think we're going to have to vote on this line item by line item.
Yeah, this is, that's something we might have to do. It is a longer recommendation. So, that's a good idea. I'm going to go to Eileen.
Thanks. Yeah, so overall, I have to agree with Chaz. This, I guess the structure, I wasn't quite understanding or following what exactly this, this recommendation was doing. But I'm going to just speak to mainly the last two bullets here. The curbside collection method of single versus dual stream. Montgomery County owns and operates its own MRF. We have invested millions of dollars since 1990, 1989. So we're now into probably the billions of dollars if you add it all up. We have we are bound by laws to do the best possible on behalf of our county. We have a very elaborate system of funding. We have the systems benefit charge, which is not a typical or common methodology. We've got our whole enterprise fund that we operate under. We've got an elaborate process involving the county executive, the county council, involving stakeholders. Our authority and our responsibility cannot be preempted. And it's certainly not going to, not by even state law. It's certainly not going to be preempted by a pro, frankly. And so I want to say, I prefer to have this bullet stricken. Otherwise, I think we're going to have some issues. The last bullet, the level of investment, again, in composting technology and infrastructure, I'm saying the same exact thing. Montgomery County owns and operates its own composting facility, and we have invested over decades, just like our MRF, in that. We do what is necessary and what we are charged with by law for Montgomery County. We continuously work for improvements on both of these facilities. We have an elaborate system of funding. It's the solid waste systems benefit charge. We operate under a solid waste enterprise fund, all of which is subject to Montgomery County's laws, requirements, and master authorization. We have an elaborate process of funding and actually planning for our facilities, and then trying to receive the fundings and approvals that are necessary by our leadership. And to think that the pro is going to influence that is unreasonable. And frankly, I'm not sure that it's capable, again, with all of the laws that we are already subject to. And again, as you identified, for state laws, we are not, Montgomery County and other counties and jurisdictions in the state of Maryland are not preempted by the state's requirements. And it's certainly not going to be subject to the pro reviewing and trying to influence those things. Now, certainly it can be part of what a pro looks at. And if the pro wants to make some, by letter or whatever, share thoughts and recommendations, that's fine. But beyond that, this is problematic language.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I would also ask that last one be stricken.
All right. Martha?
Yeah, this is a confusing recommendation. It's actually just about what the plan could talk about. I know that there's some interest in getting the packaging producers to finance new recycling. But, you know, I was going over the bill that's been introduced last night, and, you know, they have plans from individual producers in there as well as the PRO. So I'm not really sure how any of these recommendations would fit into that. I mean, they're not really recommendations, said they could cover the following things, but I don't see much. And I don't understand why the PROs would be, you know, critiquing existing facilities or changing them in any way, or an individual packaging producer would. That was actually surprised that in this new bill, individual producers can also submit their plans. Really, their plans should be about redesigning their packaging to be more recyclable.
Peter, I think you were next.
Yeah, so maybe I can, I think people are reading way too much into intent. This certainly wasn't the pro writing this. So I don't think that you need, first of all, the curbside material collection method. I don't think that necessarily needs to be in there. You've got already a bullet that talks about increasing access and frequency. So that speaks to just simply, what's the pro going to do to increase collection? So as a friendly, I would suggest we just remove that. I think on the bullet under it, the level of investment, I think it probably, if it read level of investment and approach to investment in MRF and composting technology and infrastructure, and then you remove the second sentence. I think the intent is, how does the pro infuse financial resources into the marketplace to improve infrastructure that's in place? And, you know, I can be very clear, CA's approach in other jurisdictions has been to motivate the marketplace, not dictate what widget a municipality or any other organization is going to invest in. We understand that service providers know their business far better than we will. We want to make sure that we set the right incentives in place into the marketplace so that changes happen that improve outcomes. And I take Martha's point around certainly around some of the intent of the legislation, but I would say the initial intent of EPR is to improve the actual on-the-ground collection and processing system. That's what it has the greatest ability to change in the near term, and then over the longer term, the push is around aligning design with those systems. I'm just going to bring up one additional point, if I can. So those are two friendly suggestions. The only other suggestion, I remain fairly concerned about the inclusion of commercial materials. It is, you know, how you define commercial adds a potentially incredible bandwidth of additional materials that are going to be included. They're serviced potentially much differently than residential materials, quantities, types. So my suggestion would be that if Maryland wants to move on commercial materials, they may want to look at a stepped approach, but I think there's a concern potentially in trying to do it all at once at the outset. And certainly we know that there is concerns in other jurisdictions that are happening right now where certain materials already have strong markets like OCC that tend to move out of the back of retail quite effectively already. And so the pro is now interjecting itself into an area where markets are already moving.
It sounds like lessons learned, Peter.
We're learning quite a bit.
So, I guess the level of investment. So just listening to folks, I'm not hearing much of any appetite.
No.
At least for this
Well,
one.
you haven't called on everybody, Bradley. I think
Yeah,
there's a
Scott,
lot
go
of.
first.
I definitely have something to say about that as well.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Scott.
Bradley, I think there is a lot to unpack here. I think there is a lot of confusion about what this recommendation is trying to say. So I'm going to agree with a lot of other people who've started, but I'm going to have different conclusions here. Can you go back up to the top about exactly what this recommendation is about? Recommendation 10, the plan could include strategies on the following operational considerations, okay? And Eileen, I am no Maryland constitutional scholar, so I'm not going to argue with you about state preemption of counties or anything like that. But if the plan can include strategies on some operational considerations after the needs assessment and after you figure out not every county is the same. There could be counties that need extra investment to get up to a level that the state wants everybody to have a baseline level. Montgomery, it may be well ahead of all the other counties, and therefore there's nothing that's going to impact Montgomery, but you may want to identify investment in some other more rural counties that need extra help to increase their recycling rates. That could include how to pick it up. There are benefits of separating streams. It doesn't, I don't read this recommendation as the pro dictating anything. I don't read this recommendation as the pro dictating whether a MRF buys a Bender or a Red Wave or a whatever, AMP Robotics. I don't read them dictating what type of machinery or anything like that. I think it says generally that if the pro is supposed to meet a goal and the needs assessment establishes that we're here, the pro can say, in order to meet this goal, we need to have a certain level of investment in certain types of equipment, in certain types of counties. It may be easier and cheaper to do it with a separate collection stream. Dual stream, I think, triggers a lot of people because you're thinking about old school dual stream, exactly why it is. I don't necessarily read it that way. Do you all want plastic film in your commingled bin? I don't think so, right? So do you, and Martha, to independent producer plans, there's going to be packaging that doesn't fit the commingled system. Fluid motor oil came up. The fluid motor oil guys, the do-it-yourself home mechanics, the antifreeze, the windshield wiper fluid, anything that has some sort of chemical compound in it may not be recyclable, even if it's in an HDPE jug. And they need to, they have shown in British Columbia and now in Colorado that they can come together to recover their material in a way that is not a part of the primary pro. And it's going to save the primary pro money, and it's going to lower contamination. So you need to keep some opportunities in there for independent producer plans that that would otherwise be contamination in the statewide system. So I'm not entirely sure that I'm reading this recommendation correctly, but Eileen, I think this recommendation preserves Montgomery County and allows other counties to make a decision whether they want to move towards something in Montgomery County. I don't think this says the pro can dictate that it's wiping out Montgomery's county system. So that's my point, Bradley, and I'm not ready to vote on any of these things yet until I understand exactly what we're trying to do with recommendation 10. Okay. And then if we have to, I don't see why it's bad for the pro plan, to identify investment strategies that help the pro get to the goal that the state is going to set for the pro.
Delphine?
So Scott, just one tidbit. Thanks for your comments. One tidbit. Montgomery County is the only dual stream facility in this region.
And you have really good performance and really low contamination, and we applaud you for that. And I think maybe some other counties might want to think about it.
Delphine, you're next.
Yeah, I just want to say I share what Scott just said. I mean, the way I'm reading it is about, strategies. It's not, you're not requesting or demanding that anyone is doing anything. And to me, if you're putting together a PRO, the PROs, they're paying, right, to the whole system. If they cannot at least recommend strategies to improve that system, then what's the point? Especially since You're putting targets that require that we recycle better and more. So if you don't allow the people that are paying for this plan and that are required to achieve higher targets to actually make recommendations to improve this plan, then what are we trying to do? Just to switch the financing of a system? I think let's go back to the objective. The objective is more recycle and better recycling. And if we want to do that, we need to think about strategies, not impose those strategies, but at least consider options. Dual stream, single stream, it's a huge one. We all know in the aluminum industry, but I know we're not the only industry, there's a huge difference in terms of recovery if it's single stream or dual stream. So at least having that consideration is extremely important. When you go into level of investment and the investment strategy, of course, no one is going to tell the MRF what to do or not to do, but there are new technologies every day coming on the market. And some of us are very aware or very, I know that we are investigating the new strategy for sorting, for collecting any type of cans. And this is something we can bring as just for the committee to think of. So again, if it's about submitting strategies and not obligating anyone to do anything, why are we restricting ourselves? Why should we restrict ourselves? Especially if, again, the goal is to increase recycling and better recycle.
Thank you. Ellen, I think you were next.
Yeah, thank you. I don't want to be repetitive. I agree with Delphine and Peter and Scott. I didn't read it as harsh. And Eileen, I certainly understand your position. If a law was going to pass that would dictate a change of events for Montgomery County, given their engagement there and also understanding that. But yeah, the goal of an EPR system is it's to a recognition that there needs to be change. So at least being able to put strategies on the table for review, I think makes sense. It's not meant to just be a swap of financing from producers to a standard system that I think we all agree we wouldn't be here if we didn't think it could be improved. So I didn't read it that harsh, but Eileen, if there's a way to soften this where there can still be developed strategies, intellectual thought, and the producers to bring recommendations forward, I think we should get there. Thank you.
All right, Chaz.
Yeah, I think perhaps in that bullet level of investment, that first sentence should be perhaps reworded to say strategies to use and the second sentence also strategies to use new technology, discussing technologies that can improve recycling rates, efficiency, etc. Not level of investment. Maybe it's the level of investment that's the hot point. Secondly, in the curbside collection method, yes, but there's also going to be a lot of drop off, I think, in rural Maryland. And thirdly, something that, it's at the very reality is Maryland also relies on out-of-state MRFs, particularly the Eastern Shore, because for instance, your Cecil County, why not just take it straight to the Delaware MRF? That's your closest MRF. It's going to handle you very well. And a lot of the stuff from the southern half of the Eastern Shore goes up to the Delaware MRF. The population of the Eastern Shore is about 450,000 people. Suppose you could do a MRF there, but it'd be kind of a small MRF. You do have a small MRF in Wycomico that doesn't do plastic at the moment, I believe. And there's also stuff going to MRFs in Pennsylvania because Maryland has a very unique outline, if you will. And we would be naive not to consider the reality of facilities that are out of state. It's a region, friends.
All right, Eileen.
Bradley, I just think that all this conversation, it's good conversation, but I think it all speaks to, because everybody is saying that they're reading different ways, assuming different things with this recommendation. Personally, I think it's poorly written. If we are all sitting here going, well, I read it this way, I read it that way, I blah, blah, blah. I don't think it's well written. I think that it's going to be so subject to interpretation by people outside of this group. So it either needs to be overhauled, written in a way where good comments have been made, but the text that's appearing now isn't adequate to convey those things. So personally, I am not comfortable with the way that this is drafted if we're all sitting here scratching our heads. So it either needs it needs a complete overhaul, and I don't mean like wordsmithing here on the screen as a group. That's a disaster waiting to happen. And that this is too substantial. You've heard all these comments, all these good comments. Everybody's made good comments. But what is on print doesn't capture that at all.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point as well. Just as an example, just look, this advisory council doesn't have to comment on every single aspect of the of EPR. So, for example, at least at this point, for example, there's going to be a schedule on when things are due, and when the registration is due, when the plan is due, and when EPR is going to be fully implemented in the state. If the advisory council votes that they're not comfortable pushing this forward yet, then that's completely fine. There'll be opportunities to provide testimony on, for example, the schedule that's already in the law that just dropped as well.
Brad, just vote on it as is, then, and see what happens if you want.
Yeah. So I guess
Hey, Brad, if I may interject, this
Go
is
ahead.
Mike.
Okay.
What I would suggest is if you go back, I'll be honest with you, I like the conversation we've had so far on this recommendation. I think it's all valid. But what might do, I think somebody suggested, I forgot who, to really look at it step by step. I don't know if it's Scott or somebody, but the bottom line is let's go through. There are things here. This is a recommendation on how to address operational issues. So like the schedule, high level schedule, that's something that we can recommend. Maybe we should go through and delineate the ones that make sense to us, and then forget the ones that don't, and then we can arrive at something that will be helpful for everybody to take on. But I think everybody's made some good points. So that'll be my suggestion. And you can start with the high level schedule and see if you have anything. The second point I would like to make is that don't see the PRO as like the police for the mosques. They are not. They are partners. And the PRO will have a responsibility of scouting technologies. I think Delphine alluded to that. If you're looking at new technologies and you're trying to bring it into Maryland to improve our efficiencies, that's a good thing. I don't think everybody would want to go and do that on their own, but the pro can help us in that regard. So think about it as it's a partnership is what I'm trying to say. You're still going to do the things that your law, your requirement, or your guideline wants you to do. The pro shouldn't be preventing you from doing that. And Peter, I don't know if that's a clarification that you need to address as well. Let me pause.
Martha?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, the overall recommendation is what could be in a plan that a PRO submits. I don't think that the high level schedule and the compliance stuff is something in the PRO's plan. I think that's in the legislation.
Yeah,
What would be in the
legislation.
Right. So it seems to me that what we're discussing really, those things, I don't know that we have anything really, evidence-based to say when exactly these deadlines should be. But I think that what we're talking about is, could the plan submitted to MDE by the PRO, which is basically what they plan to do and what investments they intend to make, include these last 5 open bullets, the little ones with their circles? Are those things that they might, but I don't think that the high level and compliance ones are really within the purview of the producer, of the pro, to decide anyway in their plans. Would that help to reduce here the complexity of this? It's got too much stuff in it.
Yeah, I think it could, and we can vote on each of these to add or include them. So yeah, Scott?
Thanks. One point I forgot to make, and I think it bears some influence here, is there's usually a whole nother section of the law or somewhere in the recommendations that suggests that the pro has to maximize the use of the existing infrastructure that's already in the state and build upon it. So that, I don't know that this, for anybody who's still in doubt about this recommendation, tearing down and completely changing county infrastructures, I think is misreading it, but it is unclear. Some of this is stuff for the state, for the law. Some of this is stuff for the pro plan. I think include recommendations on strategies might clear the whole thing up. But the bottom line is, if you're going to improve the system and not just shift who pays for it, you have to work to improve the system, which means you're going to need some recommendations on some investments across the state.
Chads?
I think it gets back. I think the term strategies is better than level of investment. And I think we sooner or later have to take into the realities that it may be less expensive for the PRO to use facilities located in other states simply for transportation and other reasons. But it's the whole thing of investment that it's a matter of strategies. I think the PRO is perfectly capable of suggesting strategies, but it's the processes who have to execute them. I don't think well, whatever. That's my thought.
All right. So this one right here is definitely in legislation, and isn't. And in the other states, we haven't seen this be part of the plan, but there's high-level milestones that are in legislation. So I guess the first item is, this might need to be its own thing, where this is the recommended high-level schedule for EPR implementation could be this right here. So it might have to be its own thing in legislation. Peter? You're on mute.
Sorry, the one thing that's built in, I know it's built into the new legislation, is the pro is required to implement 6 months after the plan is approved. And the only caution I'll add to that is the pro is going to need to have contracts in place to move forward. And so as long as there's an understanding that, I don't know how long local governments take to, or whether they'll have their own authority to approve contracts with the pro, but there will be, that does potentially take some time. I know here in Ontario, that was a concern with our municipalities and the ability to be able to turn over contracts with the pro over that period of time. So just a note, I don't think it's a major thing, but we probably should be providing a timeline too for when the pro moves forward with the plan.
Could you explain what you mean by contracts with the PRO?
Sorry,
What that, what, could you,
yeah.
what that entails, what's involved in this contract, and what it requires of both parties?
So Chaz, it's going to be it'll be dependent to some degree on what's in the legislation, but typically if the pro is going to be reimbursing a party for the activities that they're moving forward with, the pro is going to want to make sure that certain conditions are being met, that health and safety requirements are being met, that they understand where materials are and how much materials are getting collected. So there are needs from the pro to be able to make sure that they're getting the information that they want to make sure we're meeting the objectives of the legislation, as well as making sure that if reimbursements are being provided, that the pro has the ability to be able to make sure that that information is accurate.
Thank you.
All right. Was there any other questions, comments, concerns? As folks for Martha?
Yeah, I was just going to say on this issue of the high level schedule, I mean, there's always, when is the rulemaking taking place? And how, I don't know that we could make recommendations to this without understanding the capacity of MDE to proceed on rulemaking and when that happens and how long it would take. I mean, look, Maine, it's taken quite a while. I I understand the intent, but maybe we should just stay away from the high level schedule and let that be determined in the rulemaking so that everybody has a voice as to how quickly they can move, and focus only here on the kinds of things that might be in a plan, because the rulemaking, the registration timing and all that wouldn't be in the plan of a PRO.
Ellen?
Yeah, I do think we need to have some timeline here to make sure there's registration, that the pro has money coming in order to sustain itself. So, Martha, I think this first high level schedule is just almost more administrative necessity as well. I don't think it's meant to circumvent or squeeze out timeline on regulatory thing. But without this, I don't know, Peter, you might want to jump in. You need a legislative time registration so you can collect fees in order to begin to execute the EPR system or a pro and plan on that. So not reading. That's just, I think we need this registration period. We need this sort of timeline. And Peter, you can speak up unless I'm wrong, but without this, then it's just a flailing entity without a substantive structure forward.
Thanks, Ellen. I think that makes sense. I mean, we could always try to find a way to split it a little bit, Martha, and I understand where you're coming from, which is, the committee could always put a proviso with conditions on, a timely rulemaking process to add into it. I mean, this is really providing recommendation and guidance to the legislators to give them some boundaries, right?
And just to let folks know, in the bill that dropped, this part would be done 3 months after the legislation section ends. So you would have to get a list of producers participating in the organization by July 1st, 2025, a list of brands, a list of covered materials. So there's definitely going to need to be some updates to that, at least to that in the first legislation that was dropped, because 3 months isn't enough time to do anything. So, and then this next one right here, the plan, is being submitted to MDA 2 years after I believe it's in 2027. It is. So April 1st, 2027. And just for folks, so this one is July 1, 25 in SB 901. This is July, no, this is April 1, 2027.
So, sorry, Bradley, what do we know what the actual timeline in these other states has been? Are we just like hypothesizing on what we would like to see?
So in the other states, I know they've definitely given themselves time for the rulemaking. And the plan, I mean, Colorado, the plan was just submitted after a extremely robust stakeholder process, which included rulemaking and then another round of stakeholder engagement. And Peter, I think you were involved in that. So that plan is being reviewed, and Colorado's law was passed in 2022 or 2021. I can't remember.
I can't even think of the date today. So but I think, Martha, I think this aligns with, I think, the type of time that I think we're seeing in other states, that there's a lot of things that need to get addressed, and you want to make sure that there's an adequate consultation period with stakeholders to be able to get their input and design the program based on the specific conditions happening in the state. And we know very clearly by Oregon, California, and Colorado, they're entirely different recycling marketplaces. They function absolutely differently. There's different geographies, there's different demographics that all impact how implementation would happen.
Yeah. Peter, while you were talking, I filled in the other dates. So at least in the current legislation, the plan is April 1st, 2027, and then reporting would be 2029. So that would be implementation of EPR as well, because you're reporting on the goals and implementation and all that fun stuff. All right, who is next? Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I'm generally agreeing with Peter. Minnesota built a little bit more time into their plan, and I think that was advised. The Colorado regs didn't take that long. I think 1 year of registration, you may want to go to 18 months, but I think all of them envision starting the program within 5 years of passage, right? And you do want producers to start to register so you know who's in. It's going to take the pro another year to go, corral all the ones that haven't registered up, figure out who they are and things like that. So, I mean, it's generally on the right track. I might tweak my numbers a little bit from bullet to bullet, but I don't want to overanalyze the thing. If Andy's on, he knows the Minnesota. If Andy Hackman's on, oh, sorry, is Andy officially replacing? Maybe he's just
William. So William replaced.
Sorry. Andy, if you're on and you want to text me the answer on Minnesota, then I'll
I'm on, but I'm not allowed to speak, so sorry.
So text me the answer and then I'll add it to the chat.
Chad?
Just a thought. Peter said something I think he said it's spot on. There's a lot of learning by experience that's going on for the pro right now. Colorado's a great example. 52%, if my memory's right, of their households have what's called subscription or open market contracting, which means the county or the city doesn't provide either hauling or recycling. Individual companies go door to door to get clients. In Maryland, according to the needs assessment, that's 3/8 of the households in Maryland have that. Canada does not have this particular option. Nowhere else in the world can you find it. So I think Peter would concede and would acknowledge they're going to learn a lot when they get the response to their RFPs, which I think are due latter half of the year of this year, on how to really deal with subscription, if the zone plan works, if there's sufficient bidders, and for that matter, what the cost is. So I think there's a lot to be said for taking this a little bit slowly and carefully. None of us know everything. And when it comes to EPR and implementing it in this country, actually running a program, we still have no examples out there of collections or processing yet under EPR for packaging. We're making it up as we go.
All right. Okay. So for the high level schedule, I heard 18 months maybe for this one right here. Is that something? What are some folks' thoughts on that? Just so you know, we'll have to go through a whole rulemaking process, and then that would also inform what's going to go into the plan as well. So there's going to be a pretty intense stakeholder process with that.
So the question, Bradley, is would 18 months satisfy everybody? Because I think this schedule is something we need to make a recommendation on, just as a guide. Would 18 months satisfy people? Peter, I know you're okay with 1 year, but if we have to go to 18 months, do you have any issue with that?
I guess it depends when, I mean, this depends a little bit on when the MDE is potentially asking us to fund the needs assessment. So more time to make sure that we're capturing all of the producers is helpful. But if there's an expectation we're going to be paying a bill before that, we can't pay a bill if we don't have producers. So that's the balance.
Yeah. Kath?
I would assume that the July 1st, 2025 date in the bill for registration of producers is going to be changed because it's going to be extremely hard to pass something in Annapolis by April the 8th and then have all the producers signing up by July the 1st.
Yeah.
So some of these dates are going to have to slip regardless. Reality is what it is.
I think that's a pretty good bet. And a year would. Yeah. So
I think it'd be more like July 26 or 27 in a realistic law.
Well, not for registration. Not for registration. Registration doesn't need 2 years, 2.5 years.
Well, you still don't know how many registrants you've got in any of the states. What percentage?
I think Peter has a pretty good idea of what market share he's got in Colorado now and Oregon.
I would defer to Peter's judgment and knowledge.
Yeah,
as I normally do, Peter.
All right, so we'll keep it at a year for that one. We'll move on to the next one. Any discussion on submitting the plan 2 years after registration?
Seems reasonable.
And then we're hearing it's pretty typical to have 5 years after passage. That's what other states are doing. There's currently 4 years is the current schedule in the bill. But if things are moving back a year, it might have just been a typo. And
I think you can say within 5 years. Does that help?
Within.
Hey, Scott, did you get any input from Andy?
Not yet. He's maybe not emailed me yet. But I think Andy can participate in the chat, perhaps. I think Bradley.
To you.
Yeah, Bradley did say that the public can participate in the chat.
All right. So, for this high level schedule in legislation, is there a motion to vote on this? Not on these. These are the current bill. This is the current bill, but these items. So Peter, is there a second? Okay, looks like, so vote,
What exactly are we voting on? I'm a little confused.
so vote yes on this text right here. I'm gonna remove these since, that was really just for people's benefit to let them know what was in the current legislation. So it would be voting on this high level schedule to be put into legislation. So if you can raise your hand, yes.
Who is our unnamed voter?
That's John from Republic.
Sorry, Chaz.
Oh,
Mine doesn't always show up. Sorry about that.
that's okay. I had that in the past.
All right, we have all 16 folks online voting for this one. Isn't democracy great? All right.
That's why it's good to talk through things, Brad. That's very good to see.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna. So we had a lot of discussion on this one, and we had a recommendation to vote on these individually, right here. So Eileen. Oh, and it.
Sorry,
We're no
I didn't
longer
put my
voting, so folks can lower their hands.
Brad, just to try to make this maybe a little bit smoother, it is, and I'm completely off base here, but if we were to just provide this at a bit of a higher level, so like for compliance, it would be, how is the pro going to work with the Maryland department to ensure producer compliance, and then you could have, what is the pro doing to improve collection and access in the state? What is the pro doing to improve processing and marketing or end markets for materials? Like, do we just keep it high level, and would that help to solve some of the concerns?
Yeah, I think that's definitely consideration. Chris?
I think he may have his hand up from before.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm good.
Okay, I'm gonna lower. All right. Okay. Eileen?
Yeah, I think keeping it as Peter is suggesting, high level, and I think also just making sure the wording is clear about recommendations and strategies and sort of just overall clearer, since all of us going into it we're reading it a little bit differently. But I think higher level is better at this point and not being so specific.
So Peter, I had described how the this should be the pro right here. How the pro is going to work with the state on producer compliance.
And maybe the first one you just change, how is the pro, or describe how the pro will improve access to servicing and collection. And I think maybe that keeps it high level, because the pro is going to be looking to improve collection, and that might mean that may entail some education outreach types of components to it as well, around increasing participation rates, all of that type of stuff. And then after that, you could have something describe how the pro will improve processing infrastructure and
strategies on how.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eileen?
On the first bullet, how the pro will, I don't think you mean approve, you mean improve. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
No, that's it. That's definitely a good point. I'm going to put recommended, since we also talked about recommended strategies. If this one talks about access and service right here, do we need this one right here? I don't think so. Seems kind of redundant.
No. Yeah.
We talked about recommended level of investment.
So that might be dealt with already in the bullet above it, recommended strategies on how to improve processing infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a bit redundant, Brad, so yeah.
Chad, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a question for Peter. You brought up the issue of commercial entities very early in our session. Is that something you want to pursue in that particular bullet or separately? Because I think it's a very valid point. What that you raised.
It's just a question of what are we targeting? And what I will say is certainly in Oregon and some of the other states, it is becoming very complicated for us as we try to manage, especially with OCC, cardboard, as a lot of that material gets dealt with already through private arrangements. There's money to be made from that material. So,
Eileen?
Yeah, but I think we would be remiss to ignore the commercially generated materials. I mean, that's a significant part of our waste stream. Peter, you had touched on earlier maybe a phased approach. I think that would be a wise thing for all of us, because I don't think we should ignore or, not consider commercially generated materials, because they are so significant in Maryland, at least in Montgomery County.
And this is data. This is actually data that we report out every year in our recycling report. So we put an estimation on our landfill capacity. So in 2022, we had something like 21, 22 years left of actual landfill capacity. Now that doesn't necessarily take into account population increases. If you include population increases, we have about 14 years of landfill capacity. There have since been some permitted expansions, so that is no longer the case, and you'll see the revised numbers in our new reports. But we have, so that's definitely going to increase. But in terms of the landfill conversation in the state of Maryland, there are fewer and fewer options, and so any level of investment in diversion, whatever it is going to help with that. Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Eileen on this one. Commercial is a huge, broad category. Most of it isn't appropriate. But I think, as I mentioned in some prior meetings, there are consumer-facing goods that will may not end up in the residential stream, but may end up in the public waste stream that I think I think that the plan intends to cover. On the go, food service, bottles, cans, things of that nature that you may want to be able to capture from some small segments of the, I don't even necessarily call it commercial as much as hospitality and things of that nature. So, but again, we're not talking about a private stadium that pays for its own service. We're talking about, things that residents get on the go, but may not make it all the way home to their residential. But otherwise, it's the same packaging that is being sold in grocery stores and retail.
What if a stadium didn't have any collection at all?
If the stadium was a public stadium and didn't have any collection at all and had a significant amount of material, and it was in the state's interest to have the pro do it, then, I think it's who's funding the stadium, who's responsible for paying for that. Do they become a producer, that kind of thing.
Chad, you had a comment?
Yeah, I think that part of the problem is we're grappling with, and partially based on the last three comments, we're grappling with what do we mean by commercial and what part of commercial do we truly care about? And I think that with a lot of commercial entities, if it's a restaurant, it's food waste. It's so diverse and so unique from entity to entity. And I think Peter has raised some excellent points about the problems they're grappling with now. I, in some ways, don't feel qualified yet on how we should deal with commercial in this law, because we do have a lot of businesses that sell OCC and they sell stretch wrap, pallet wrap, and they make a nice little penny off of it. On the other hand, there's much smaller commercial entities that just put it on the curb and wave goodbye. So I'm not sure either. I don't know what the answer is, and maybe something we're going to learn over time.
So with this, this is the plan. Really, the plan is going to be submitted in 3 years with the proposed schedule. So there's going to be some time to figure it out. There's some conversation on a phased approach, and not all commercial, but segments of commercial. But there is and our needs assessment shows this as well. There's a significant amount of waste and potential in the commercial sector of things that would be recyclable that are going to landfill.
Brad, if I can just add really quickly, I totally understand that there are those materials ending up in landfill. I guess what I'm just saying is, if the state is going to move forward with this, and if they're going to define this material in, it captures a whole bunch of entities that are new potentially. You're going to get warehouses that are adding shrink wrap to pallets. You're going to get those same warehouses that are going to be adding pallets. There is substantially more entities that you're going to capture in the economy. And even if we phase it, which is fine if we phase it, but we need to understand exactly who are we registering? Are we capturing all of those materials? Or are we only capturing a small, because all of those producers will need to report and they will need to pay into the system. And I guess what I'm just trying to articulate is it adds a lot of complexity from a compliance perspective for the pro.
Are you suggesting we further define what is meant by commercial and what should be done? Eliminate tertiary packaging?
I mean, this depends a little bit, Chaz, on how you define tertiary packaging. Are you?
Of course.
So, some jurisdictions will specifically say we're only focusing on materials that are being supplied to the household, and that's how they differentiate, and they include all of those types of packaging. And so you'll have, takeout packaging that'll come back. You'll get transport packaging that will be sent to the house and all of that type of stuff. But you're focusing on the materials that are supplied.
Scott, I think he had
I put my hand back up. Sorry. I support a phased-in approach that responds to the needs assessment. I am quite sure when we see the needs assessment, you're going to see significant, and I think you just hinted at it, Bradley. We're going to see a significant, in some sectors, that are not residential, we are going to see data that shows that there's a significant flow of materials that would otherwise be covered that may be exempt. In the Colorado needs assessment, Peter will probably fact check me on this, but I'm going to give you a rough generalization that for some materials, it was up to 30% of the material that was available and otherwise would be covered, ended up not being covered because of the definitions of, you know, full commercial. Colorado did at least explore in the second program plan how to service hospitality and things like that. In Colorado's instance, they were thinking about ski resort towns, which, you know, in the off season may only have 5,000 people in them, but in the winter may, you know, burgeon up to, you know, several 100,000, right? I think the same thing could be said for the shoreline on the Eastern Shore, where the day-to-day residential is one thing, but the crush of tourism may, you know, overwhelm their system in the summer months. So I think I'm just gonna put in one last note for some flexibility to determine materials that would otherwise be covered that could potentially be covered and help the state. I think the scope of the law does include public space. I believe we've already settled that. And to the extent that you've got public space covered, you need to, you know, whether you want to call that commercial or not, it's commercial material that ends up in the public space. So it's not so much covering the commercial places, it's covering the material that comes from commercial places that ends up in the public space. I'll stop.
All right. I think, Abigail, you were next.
Sure. I mean, I wonder if there's an openness to adding that clarifying language of commercial collection that ends up in public space to it to clarify. Because from my perspective, I think that in this sentence, in this bullet, there's a certain amount of specificity that forces more structure to something where we don't have the data yet to properly define it. And I would rather broaden it in some way so that if it turns out that commercial collection from public spaces or whatever is appropriate to be included, it can be, but there's no requirement that it must be in there if there is no, like, that all of the things that could theoretically fit under this must be included in there. I just worry that it's creating a whole lot of additional things for the PRO and the needs assessment to have to analyze whether or not it has the potential to actually be necessary. And just the fact that we keep coming back to tertiary, and I know you guys know how I feel about tertiary packaging being included. I just think that there's a lot of unknowns in this bullet.
I think we may have voted on tertiary, actually.
Right, which is to define it eventually.
No. All right. Eileen?
Just going to point out the obvious. Wouldn't it be nice if we had the needs assessment?
Yep.
You said it. I was thinking it.
I mean, we're just going around in circles. I mean, it's kind of crazy in my opinion, in my humble opinion. I think we're kind of putting the cart I don't know. It's backwards in some regards. The only general comment is, you know, the commercial sector is just, you know, it's this broad title over something where one size doesn't fit all. You got a range of sizes, a range of types. You've got a range of materials that are generated. You've got a range of how things are, frankly, collected. You know, you've got formal collection services. You've got businesses that are selling materials and getting revenues. You've got mom and pop shops where they collect their own recyclables and they pack them in the trunk of somebody's car and, you know, drop them off somewhere, right, for recycling. So I just feel as though in some regards, I feel like we shouldn't get too, again, I don't think we should get too specific. We should find some language where it captures, considering the commercial, the materials that are generated by entities, in the commercial sector. But I don't want to say commercial collection, because that means so many different things. You got self-haul, backhaul, you got just a range.
So if it says segments of commercial collection, and we need to
I would
further
say at
define-
least segments,
Yeah.
because again, why are we devoid of information? I think we shouldn't say include segments. We don't really know. So at least segments.
Yeah, I think this leaves it open. It's not defined right now. We aren't putting people in a corner. There's going to be a regulation, robust stakeholder process when we're developing regulations, in addition to the plan as well, where that detail is going to be fleshed out. Peter, you are muted.
The only thing you need to keep in mind is you've got 1 year of registration to registration. We need to know who's included before that point. So if we've got to let people know if they're supplying cardboard boxes back of house, they need to report to us. So we have to know that. So I know we want to push this one, a little past, and I agree with that to some extent, but as long as we're comfortable that a decision on this can be made in time for the pro to make decisions for producers reporting, that's the concern that the pro will have, because we'll need that information. We'll need to know and be able to tell producers, is your material subject to reporting and fees?
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
It has some legislative implications. The specific language of whatever law the General Assembly chooses to pass.
Yeah.
Which does currently, I believe, include tertiary packaging.
The only difference is if you chose to include it, post, it's focused on residential materials for this allotment of time.
Yeah.
And potentially then you could add it in after, after the 5 years, or it's considered after that point, you could do something like that. But the pro just needs to understand, otherwise it's a lot more complication upfront for us in the reporting. And it has been, I won't say a nightmare, but I know there's people that have veins in their foreheads now.
So Peter, would the language around the phased-in approach help us here? Would that be better? Maybe we can reward it with that, phased-in approach included. Would that help?
Well, right now, that for the pro, that still means, okay, we're still likely gonna need all of those entities to report into the pro day one, because it's an included material. So that's what that does. It provides us more time, I guess, to figure out how to collect that material, depending on what that schedule might look like, but it obligates the material.
Okay.
So I'm going to move on to the next one, unless there's any other comments. So as folks were talking, just to follow the theme that we've been talking about, recommended strategies to increase, I should say, the level of education and awareness initiatives to decrease contamination and raise participation. Any questions on that one? All right. So this one, previously we said that this one might be captured. It was in this bullet right here, but it might be this one, how the pro will improve access and on service. This should be probably on service and collection. Do we need this line right here?
I don't think so.
Scott?
And I think access is different than how you collect.
I agree.
Okay.
I think it's critical to the quality of the
So,
recycling we will get.
Again, we're not talking about switching, we're talking about look at some of the counties that may not have as much infrastructure as the others. They may be further away from a MRF than others, such as Chaz was talking about on the Eastern Shore. It may be in the pros benefit. It may be in the state's benefit to suggest different collection modalities than, building a brand new MRF for Eastern Shore, right? So
Well, it's got to be the same for Western
it
Maryland,
would be the same thing for the Panhandle. Yep.
and frankly, functionally including Frederick also, depending, because Frederick's got some.
There are facilities in southwestern Pennsylvania that could easily take some, or West Virginia that can take, maybe, I don't know how many facilities in West Virginia, but I know there's facilities in Pennsylvania that could take some material, from Frederick over if that became the best place for certain streams of certain materials. So I think some recommendations here, some analytical look at, what might help on how to collect is in addition to purely just an assessment of access.
So I did add, just to stick with the theme of strategies, and then I added counties still get to choose how to implement collection in their jurisdiction.
You could even, if people are uncomfortable with curbside in that, you could just say strategies on material collection methods, but.
And Bradley, I would make it similar to the other bullet where you say recommend strategies.
That's a good point. Yeah.
On collection methods to optimize capture and quality of materials, something like that. I just feel like the way it was stated was so open-ended. It's like, what the hell does that mean?
All right, Abigail.
I support that recommendation. I think sometimes when we're talking, when various states talk about improving material collection, they'll use one of my least favorite words in EPR, which is convenience. Because convenient does not mean you're getting better stuff. It's just easier for people to not have to hold it in their hands anymore. But I think that thinking about optimizing capture and quality is a great combination of the two that I wish I saw in other states too.
Yeah, that's great.
And I would delete single stream versus dual stream. It's not a battle at the moment.
But that doesn't mean that if a county wants to decide to go to dual, they can. And if there's now a fund that can help with that, it might make that transition a little bit easier.
Yeah, but I don't. Yep. The eliminating the parenthetical now that we've fixed the bullet, I think is fine. It doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Bradley, that second part, counties still get to choose how to implement collection in their jurisdictions. Thanks for that. I think I would phrase it a little differently. That seems a little casual to me. And
Sure.
And so I would lean towards counties or jurisdictions still, retain the authority and responsibility for implementation of recycling programs in their county or in their jurisdiction.
I think that should be local governments.
Thank you. Local governments.
The
Yes.
155.
Yes, local governments.
Okay.
And actually, it's not just implementation. It's responsibility for managing, developing, managing, and implementation of.
Is it implementation and operation? Is that, Eileen, what you're?
Yeah.
All right.
Implementation and operations of. Thank you, Peter.
No problem.
So, pick a theme. On the level of investment in MRF / composting technology and infrastructure.
Level of investment or just best strategies?
Investment strategies.
No, just best strategies.
I think, Chaz, the intention of the level of investment is, do you want the pro talking about what they are going to potentially look to invest in the state?
I think if you're talking about best strategies, you're also going to be discussing cost.
Okay.
I think best strategies is more comprehensive than just level of investment.
So Scott?
Can we strategies including potential investment?
No, again, Scott, I think strategies include, it implies investment. How are you going to talk about strategies if you don't discuss cost?
Yeah, I think we're getting around the same thing. I think you want when they're talking about their strategies to also make sure that it includes what that cost is going to be.
If the PRO did not include the cost, I would be very worried about the PRO. Ain't nothing that's free last time I checked.
Eileen?
I don't know if we need level of investment. Isn't it just recommend strategies on investments in MRF, composting technology, and infrastructure?
I think that sounds good.
All right.
And can I ask a question of the group for 1 second? I'm just going to think
Sure.
out loud. I'm sorry. The previous bullet where, I was saying retain the authority and responsibility. If the word responsibility is there, that doesn't, I'm not intending to denote that, for example, that we may have all of the funding responsibility. I mean, the PRO, for example, getting funding from the PRO or contributions, we still want that. What I mean is that, we're the ones that are actually going to we have the authority, and then we have the execution of it.
Management of whatever.
I just don't want to get us in a unintended corner.
Okay. All right. So we have the pro plan should include options to use new technology as they can improve recycling. Pro plan should recommend options to use new technology as they can improve recycling rate, efficiency, supporting compliance.
So the strategy is going to be on the level of investment, not just what are the most viable technologies or the ones that will meet the goals.
Can you say that again, Chad?
So we're saying recommend strategies just on the level of investment, not just simply strategies in MRF composting and infrastructure to increase recycling and reduction. Because again, strategies is going to obviously include cost.
To increase recycling and reduce contamination.
No, yeah,
And then-
but I'm saying, I think the term investment is irrelevant because it's encompassed in strategies. I don't know anybody who does a business strategy plan without any thought for what it's going to cost.
Well, it's definitely going to, there's definitely going to be a cost to it. There's also going to be goals as well. And the investment needs to be right sized so that the goals can be met also. Peter?
Yeah, I guess I'm a bit lost, Chaz, in the sense of we've labeled above that the local government is developing, managing, implementing, and operating. The second one is saying a strategy around investment, because what else is the pro doing if it isn't about investment? What other thing would they be doing? Like, we're not going into the facility, we're not operating the facility. So it's about how the pro is going to leverage to improve outcomes at those facilities. And I think that the only thing that can be is investment.
No, I agree with that. My only concern would be if the pro does not want to spend money because he think a technology is too expensive, and would be substituting their opinion for that of facility operators. That's my one concern.
So, we could probably talk about this for hours.
Which we don't want to do.
Yeah. So we made a lot of really good changes to this recommendation. Martha?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that it seems like we're trying to work through a list of everything that should be in a plan. And the bill has 5 pages of that in it. I mean, most of the bills have a long list of what goes in the plan. So I'm not sure if this is supposed to be in addition to what's already there, or, I mean, you're right, we could spend a whole day working on this.
Yeah, I think it's more, don't forget about these things. And
Don't
some of these
forget about these. Okay, just to make
Yeah,
it clear.
and some of them are definitely already in the legislation. So yeah, I think it's more from that perspective.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Okay, so do we have, I'm just gonna take out, oh no, I'm in recommending mode. I don't wanna, let me go to 125, see if I can see the whole thing.
I hope we're going to get to those definitions in the next 5 minutes, because we'll have to take it up at another meeting.
It's gonna be tight.
I think we'll have to do the latter. I agree with you, Martha. I have some questions about definitions.
All right. So vote on this recommendation right here as is. So vote yes on
Brad, as is, or with the changes?
I mean, so when I say as is, I mean the changes, but what I can say, recommend it with changes.
With the edits,
So-
I should say. Yeah.
So, is there a move to vote or motion?
So move.
Second? Anyone brave enough? Is there a
I'll
second?
second it. I'll second it.
All
Let's
right.
the show on the road.
All right. Okay. So, if you can raise your hand, yes on this recommendation. All right. We have all 16 again. It's a miracle. All right. So folks can lower all their hands. I don't think we're going to get to the recommendation today. We do have to get a letter to the legislator, the the legislative bodies and the governor as well. So I'm gonna have to talk to my leadership and the co-chairs about what we want to do. But we don't have enough time in this meeting to talk about the definitions, but we do have to get something to the legislator and the governor as well. And then, so, just to let folks know about that. I do want to open it up to public. Oh, first there's Chris and Kelly, and then we do need to get to public comment. Chris, did you have something?
I'm good. I'm good, Brad. I got to jump though to a safety meeting, so have a
Okay.
good week. All right? Bye.
Yeah. So I'm going to open it. Well, before we get to public comment, I was already starting to clean up some of the recommendations that we already voted on. And listening in on these meetings, it may not be apparent, but there's just reading through those, there's a significant amount of consensus in those recommendations. And so I just want to thank folks and for the robust conversation that we've been having in these. I know the timing with the needs assessment is not ideal. If we had initially received our funding, that would have been delivered 6 months ago or more, but it is what it is. But yeah, there's definitely been a lot of really good conversation in everything that we've talked about so far in these meetings, and we're planning on continuing the advisory council into the future as well. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities. And
I believe
think
Kelly had her hand up.
Who had their hand up?
I thought Kelly had her hand up.
I think she put it down.
Okay. So are you saying that this is going to go to the governor and the legislature without our discussion of the definitions, which I consider to be fundamental to any framework?
So for
They
that,
were initially up with the objectives discussion, but then they were put at the very end, and we've never been able to get to them, Brad.
yeah. So for that, I just need a discussion with our leadership and our co-chairs. And we're definitely going to be talking about the definition, and there's going to be more versions of the bill as well. I just don't know what the path forward is at this point on that.
Kelly points out we skipped over the recommendation 1. So we skipped over the objectives and the definitions.
Yeah, and I know we're definitely going to be having more conversation on that. And then just there's some questions on testimony. I think we are, but I know we're definitely going to be there on the 18th. So there's going to be probably a lot of really good discussion on that. All right. I'm going to open it up to public comment right now. Is there anybody in the public that wants to raise their hand? And provide public comment?
So Brad, Brad, can you hear me? One
Yeah.
thing I add is we just need to note the lack of discussion on the definitions. However we go forward, so that way when we come next time, since this will continue, we can continue to do that. But we'll note it as we go forward.
So Michael, you're suggesting we call this an incomplete report, which is accurate.
Yeah, that is true as well.
I mean, I would like to report that the Sierra Club feels that the objectives and the definitions are the most important part of the framework. And they were not discussed. They were not voted on or whatever.
All right. Well, there was a lot of really good discussion today. I appreciate all the input from everyone. We are out of time. So I'm going to end the recording right now.